As we read through the last part of Exodus 17, Moses is leading the children of Israel, probably 2 to 3 million people, from bondage and slavery in Egypt to the promised land. So this is a great trip. And much of what we read in the Old Testament is about that traveling from bondage and enslavement to the promised land. And so when I came to this passage myself, and I'm reading through this story about Amalek attacking Israel and Moses up holding his hands above, or the rod of God above the people, and them prevailing over Amalek, the question that came to my mind, I thought, if I were there and experiencing this, here's what I'd ask God: why does life have to be so hard? I don't know if you felt that way inside your heart, expressed that to others that you know, or that you've expressed that to God. But I have. And I think that many of us go through a series of challenges, and it's like one more thing. It's like Bill Murray on Groundhog Day. You wake up another day. I just can't believe after all of this, it's like the proverbial shoe that's going to drop. I just know that other shoe is going to drop. I think back over the decades of my life, and probably for the first 40 years, there are ups and downs and challenges and so forth. But when I hit around 41, it's like every year there's something traumatic that's happening in my life. Physical things or whatever. And it makes you wonder, what is God doing in my life? And we had this guy in our church, Carl, and great guy, and he used to always say to me, "Pastor, life is hard, and then you die." And I said, "Carl, you are so negative." I said, "You just need to be more positive." So we kind of joke about it. He had a little smirk when he would say that, but he'd say that all the time. Life is hard, and then you die. And after a few years, Diane and I look at each other and we say, I think Carl was right. It even reminds me of Jacob, when he is coming from really the promised land to Egypt the first time with 70 of his family, and Pharaoh asks him, he says, "How old are you?" Of course, they lived a little longer in that day. And here's what he says. He said, "I'm 130 years old." And he said, "Few and evil have been the days and years of my life." It's like, that's how you sum it up, 130 years. It's been really, really hard. And I know many times we tend to feel that way. We don't want to gripe and complain because there are a lot of people that have a lot worse problems. In fact, when I read about people like Johnny Erickson Tata, she tells the story of when she was 17 years of age, diving into a lake, and she becomes a quadriplegic. And for some of you have followed her life and her writings, and I just want to shut my mouth and not complain about a thing. But when it's you have to live with it. So if you're going through difficulty after difficulty after difficulty after difficulty, you feel that way. Why does life have to be so hard? So I think that with Moses leading his big family from Egypt to the promised land, they come to this particular battle. And if you can just kind of imagine, they go through many, many events, but here they are following God, doing his will. He's given them a cloud by day, a pillar of fire by night. He's shown his presence. He's parted the Red Sea. We've seen all of the miracles in Egypt with the various plagues and so forth. And then we come to this battle with the Amalekites. Now, the Amalekites, we learn about them a little earlier. They are descendants of Esau. So you have Jacob and Esau. Jacob is another name is Israel, and then Esau. So these are, in a sense, distant cousins. And yet they are a much larger group of people, and they have a trained military. They have been equipped Whereas Israel, they don't have instruments of war, maybe a few things, but they don't have any training, and they are completely vulnerable. In other words, it has them walking, God has them walking into an impossible situation. And I can tell you this, that when you go through a number of challenges and then there's just one more, you want to throw up your hands and say, what is God doing in my life? And typically what follows that is incredible frustration. We think of the questions why, but I want us as we look at this passage this morning and try to put ourselves in this place to ask these questions. What is the reason God is doing this? Because God does have a reason. He doesn't just do random things. God has a reason. Then there's a response to this struggle. How are we going to respond to it? And then finally, the result or the consequence of this. So first of all, the why. Why? Maybe the most important question we ask. It says in Exodus 17:8, then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. And you think, all we're doing is following God. So if I do God's will, I obey God, I read my Bible, I pray, I go to church, I try to do the right thing, then shouldn't my life be going better than this? Shouldn't there be some sort of reward for living this way? You would think. But then we back up and we think, what is the goal that God has for his people? What does God want? What does he want for Israel? Well, you'd say to get to the promised land. That's the goal. And typically that's the way we get up every morning. We have goals. We have goals. And the goals are getting there and getting her done, right? So we have a place to go. Let's get there. And probably it should have taken about 40 days to get from Egypt to the promised land with that many people. Do you know how long it took them? 40 years. Because it wasn't so much the destination that God was interested in. He was getting them there, but there was something greater that he wanted to accomplish. And yet we can be so consumed with getting up today, and I need to get here, or I need to get this done. And if that doesn't happen, I get incredibly frustrated. And we fail to see that God is after something else. He's not about getting there, and he's not about getting her done. You know, so many things that we do today are not going to matter in 10 years at all, or in 10 days. But we're in a rush. We have blinders on. We're focused. Anyone gets in the way of that, disturbs that, it's a great frustration. Now, this was more than a frustration. The Amalekites were not just some little gnat buzzing around your head. They had the potential to absolutely annihilate Israel. So this is a big, big challenge. It's very easy to spend our lives focused on the things that do not really matter that much to God. And they do not really matter in light of eternity. What is the goal? The goal is this: relationship. God wants a relationship with his people. A personal, intimate, real relationship. That's what he's after. And so bringing these events into your life, which seem to be great frustration, are actually designed to develop your relationship with God. You think about Moses. What we know about Moses and unique about Moses is God describes him as he knew God face to face. Relationship. And where God is trying to take you and you say, well, I'm already a Christian. I already know God. I'm already on my way to heaven. But he wants to make that relationship that you have today more intimate, more real, more vital to you. That's what this is about. So that's why it took 40 years, because there was just that stubborn resistance to think in terms of the temporal rather than the eternal. So that's the reason. If we could stop for a moment when we hit a snag in life, when we have one thing after another, and you say, why does life have to be so hard? To realize that God is after something different than what you're probably thinking. So that's the reason, relationship. Secondly, the response. How do we respond when this happens? Well, I can tell you how I respond. I usually get irritated. I know it's hard for you to imagine that. You probably talked to Reed. But I think in a way we all get a little bit frustrated. Some of us, suck it up and we endure and we press on. Some of us blow up, some of us clam up or whatever, but we do get frustrated because the plan that we had when we got up didn't take place. In verse 9 it says, "So Moses said to Joshua, 'Choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with the staff of God in my hand.'" So this is how he responds. One, he tells Joshua, his assistant, he says, "Gather some men. These are not trained warriors. They have not been through boot camp. They have no weapons." He said, "But get some men and go out and fight." Well, you're going to be annihilated. But he tells them to do this. He says, "I'm going to go and stand on top of the hill, take the rod of God, which is a symbol of God's authority, God's power. It is the same rod that turned to a serpent he picked up by the tail. It is the same rod that parted the Red Sea. It is the same rod that he waved over the land of Egypt with all those miracles." So this rod represents the presence and the power of the Lord. He said, "I'm going to stand up on that hill and hold that rod up." Now, if you didn't know about God, you think that is absolutely nuts. You think about it. Now, we read it, we think, well, that's in the Bible, but think about if you're there. I mean, go out and fight them. Well, there's just no way. You're going to be run over and just completely wiped out. And I'm going to go stand on the top of the hill and hold up a stick. And I think that's the response that two things that really show this response. One is obedience, and two is faith. And they really go together. They're not separate, they go together. True faith always results in obedience. So obey by going and fighting. But I'm not going to win. It doesn't matter. It's not up to you. The result of this is up to God. He wants you to obey. And sometimes God asks us to do things and to obey him when we don't see any hope in it. It doesn't make sense. But it's always right to be obedient to what he commands us to do. It's like when he tells the children of Israel, the priest to put your foot in the water. Walk across. We're going to drown. But you take that step, and that step of faith. So faith and obedience work together in this. And when I think about how God has wired us, we tend to not obey right away, and we tend not to believe and trust him. And what we do is we develop a wrong type of thinking. We think of something else we could do. Because this just doesn't sound too good, like marching in there and fighting these guys and standing on the hill holding the rod. So I've got a better idea. And what that wrong thinking leads to wrong feeling, leads to wrong talking, leads to wrong action, and leads to disaster. So the way that God builds this relationship we talked about, that's why he's doing this, is by testing your faith. He's asking you to obey when it may not make sense. He's asking you to trust in him when it doesn't seem to make sense. And so he's stretching all of them. I would say this, looking back over my life, that the course that it takes, the course of your life, is not determined by what happens to you. It's determined by how you respond to what happens to you. Because if you just say, well, the course of my life is just all these things happen, you're a victim. No one wants to be around a victim all the time. I'm a victim. I couldn't help anything. But your life will really flow out of how you respond to what happens. We get the same weather, the same rain, the same sunshine, the same cancer, the same car accidents. It happens to everybody in the world. What directs the course of your life is how you're going to respond to what goes on. My natural responses: frustration, anger, blame, whatever. But the right response, he's saying, is you trust me and you obey me. And this exercise that we see of them, of Joshua fighting, that is the obedience of Moses on the hill with his arms up, Aaron and Hur helping him hold his arms up with the rod of God, and them prevailing in battle and winning the battle, is the exercise of that faith and that obedience. So we come to the last observation that I have, is the result. So we have the reason, relationship. Response, it should be by faith and obedience. But what's the result of that? In verses 15 and 16, it says, and Moses built an altar and called the name of it, the Lord is my banner. Have you heard that before? The Lord is my banner. Jehovah Nissi. And he also says, a hand upon the throne of the Lord. In other words, my hand is raised to the Lord. You find that in the Old Testament, many times they build an altar unto the Lord where they worship him. And this is what Moses does. He worships the Lord, because when he gives them the victory over Amalek, which is miraculous, he gives God all the praise and thanksgiving and credit for that. Now, the next day, they're going to face other challenges. You would think that after we learn this a few times, that we'd be really good. But I tell you what, every day we get up and things don't go as planned, they don't fit on our schedule, we tend to lapse back into this. You know, leaving Egypt, they saw the Red Sea parted. They get ready to go into the Promised Land, they have to go over the Jordan River. And they doubt again. The Lord parts the water again. So many of these lessons we have to learn again and again. Because I can think back many times in my life, I would say, Lord, why does life have to be so hard? Okay, now I get it. I'm learning. It's about relationship. You're building my faith and obedience, and you're accomplishing your perfect will. And as soon as I learn that lesson, I step into the next day, and I revert back to doubt, back to fear, back to taking control of my own life and doing it the way I think is better. And it's disastrous. It is every time. What I share with you today doesn't take away the challenges that we face. But understanding a little better of what God is up to and what he is developing can encourage us. We come to know God through the struggle. Not by going around it, not by making it go away. And each of us have different struggles. You know, I can remember thinking, going through I had a car accident, went through several health issues, and I'm looking next door, and my neighbor, he doesn't have any of those. He's not even a Christian. And he just bought a new boat. I'm thinking, what? I don't understand that. You would think that if Lord, I abandon all. I'm going to follow you. I'm going to serve you. I'm going to surrender my whole life to you. I'm not asking for a boat, but I mean, at least you would think that life would be better. It is better. But the better part is in the relationship. The intimacy with God. If you've ever read Johnny Erickson Tata, she has a book, When God Weeps. Also, you read about her story. I hope that you read that. You read that and you think this woman has a relationship with God that is amazing. Amazing. And when she gets to heaven, she's not going to be a quadriplegic. You know, she's a little older than I am. She's lived her whole life this. And it's not just that, well, she lost the use of her arms and legs, and later on she had cancer. She went through all kinds of things. It'd be so easy to just give up. But God, through the struggle, is bringing you to himself and developing that relationship in new and fresh ways. And folks, it never ends. You don't kind of get to, well, I hit 40 or I hit 50 or I hit 60 or I hit 80. And you know what? I just learned all those lessons and get up today and I just trust God. No, you are going to feel that tension. And you want to say, why does life have to be so hard? So he builds this altar. The Lord is my banner. Now, in those days, and even in present battles, a banner would be a signal, be a flag, typically a flag or some kind of pole. And the person that carried that banner was probably the most important person in the military, because that rallied the troops. You signal with the flag. You have identity with the flag. You lead with the flag. You retreat with the flag. And so you can imagine, it's like the Far Side. You ever see, some of you like Far Side? I know it's kind of sick sense of humor, but it reminds me of the two deers that were standing up talking to each other, and the one had a big target on his chest, and the other guy says to him, "Bummer of a birthmark." And you think, well, what is it that has happened here? This guy, whose name is Joseph de Castro, he's in the battle. You probably know Civil War. You probably know Gettysburg. The most significant turning point in the battle at Gettysburg was Pickett's charge. So Pickett was ordered by General Lee to charge Cemetery Ridge with all these troops. And they go up this hill. I've been there. I've run up that hill. You kind of get the lay of the land. And so they're moving up, and they were repelled by General Meade and his forces back off that hill. Many, many people died in Pickett's charge. But there's a part of the story that I never knew about. This Joseph de Castro was the signal bearer. He was the flag bearer for the Union. He was up on Cemetery Ridge. And he was the first Hispanic to receive the Medal of Honor. But part of what he did is when you have all of these rebels coming up, screaming and shooting, and you wonder, who's going to win this? This guy takes his signal, comes up over the wall, drives down the rebel signal bearer, grabs his flag, and takes it back and presents it to his colonel. I thought, that is pretty cool. And you think, how does that impact and affect the rest of the troops? Well, dramatically. And here's what he says: the Lord is my banner. In other words, the Lord is my signal. He is my identity. He is my encouragement, my enthusiasm. And he says, I raise my hand, lay hold of the Lord. When we lay hold of Christ in relationship, we also lay hold of everything else we need. Let me say that again. When we lay hold of Christ in relationship, we also lay hold of everything else we need. That's why God's will for you is not about stuff. It's not about things. It's not about getting to the place, the promised land. It is about relationship, because when you have relationship with Christ, that banner, the Lord, in fact, the Lord Jehovah, you have the capital L and the all capitals, means Jehovah. This is a personal relationship with God. This is the picture of Christ. So when I lay hold of Him, when I lay hold of Christ, I have everything I need. Now, there's so many scriptures in the New Testament that will confirm that. Hebrews 4:16 says, "Come boldly to the throne of grace." Philippians 3 verse 12 says, "Laying hold of that for which Christ Jesus has also laid hold of me." 1 Timothy 6 and verse 12 says, "Laying hold of eternal life." Matthew 6:33, that I think is familiar to many of us. "You seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all these things will be added unto you." Typically, the way I'm wired is I'm going to pursue things that benefit me. I just naturally go there. Here's what C.S. Lewis said. He says, "Look for yourself, and you will find in the long run only hatred, loneliness, despair, rage, ruin, and decay. But look for Christ, and you will find Him, and with Him, everything else." This is what the Lord has for us. So when you ask Him, why does life have to be so hard? There's a reason. Relationship. He loves you. He wants relationship. You say, "I already have a relationship." He wants to deepen that relationship. And with Him comes everything else. What will be our response? Either we fear, we get frustrated, we get angry, we come up with our own plan, we work our own plan like so many times we do, or we can respond in faith and trust Him and obey Him through it. Through it. And the result will be Christ, the signal bearer. The Lord is my banner, and everything that comes with Him. In 1887, William Borden was born to a wealthy family. You may know the name Borden, and it's not the dairy Borden, but the silver mining Borden in the 19th century. Young man, and he grew up, silver spoon in his mouth, so to speak. He had everything. He was very successful as an athlete, as a student. At 16 years of age in Chicago, he went to a D.L. Moody evangelistic meeting and became a Christian. Changed his life. He went off to Yale University, succeeded in academics, succeeded in athletics, and felt called to go to the northeast part of China and minister to Muslims. You can imagine that in the beginning of the 20th century, of what that might have been like for him to forsake everything, all of his wealth, all of his riches, all of his future, and to go to probably one of the most remote places in the world and try to reach some of the most difficult people in all of the world. This is what he chose to do. So part of that preparation would be to get on a ship, go to Egypt, to Cairo, and to study the language and the culture for the place he was going. He got on a ship, sold all his possessions, travels to Cairo. When he gets to Cairo, he contracts spinal meningitis and dies. That's not the way great stories are supposed to go. You probably thought I was going to tell you that he spent his life and saw all these people come to Christ. No. He never got there. He never got there. Failure. That's the way we would think. Oh, that's too bad that it wasn't failure. Because getting there is not the point. Getting her done is not the point. It is relationship. And that's what he had. Shortly before he died, he wrote these words: no reserves, no retreats, no regrets. That's what it's all about. And I think what you go through right now and what you'll go through tomorrow and the next day will always pull on you to forget what God is really doing. God is moving us to relationship with himself, not just getting us to the promised land. We build our lives thinking about just getting to the promised land. And we may never get there as we think so. Eventually, we'll be with the Lord. But in our minds, we have something on our agenda. He is moving us to a relationship with himself. My prayer for you today is that whatever God has brought into your life or whatever God brings into your life, that you not give in to the frustration and to the fear and to the anxiety. You're going to question. But just remember this. In this lesson and so many others, he is moving you through this to a closer walk with him. And with that is everything else.